The year is 1999. I was only 5 at the time, but I remember seeing it for the first time. A man who was parkouring and keeping up with the car. It would leap great distances and land every single jump. They would also grab swings and poles and run along the telephone wires. I was so invested in this imaginary being that I would name them Parkour Man. I'm almost certain anyone reading this has done the same in some capacity, but I never really thought too deeply about it, or why this was a phenomenon that we all share. Like the cool S that everyone used to draw, no one knows the origin of that parkour guy. Ever since I've gotten older, my ability to imagine the guy has gotten worse and worse, and eventually it stopped existing altogether. That is until last week. Monday of last week, to be exact. So ever since I was a child, I would get crazy migraines and body pains. I would also complain to my parents, saying how much it hurt, but they always chalked it up to growing pains or ADHD. Strangely enough, the pains and migraines started to become less and less frequent as I got older. This was the same time I started seeing less and less of the Parkour Man. Fast forward, and I'm now 29 and starting to get random pains and migraines again that I can't explain. So I did the adult thing and went to a doctor about my issues. They did some tests on my blood pressure and a urinalysis, and the doctor called me after a day or two. To my surprise, he told me I was just dehydrated and to drink plenty of water. I drink about a gallon of water a day. I don't know how I'm dehydrated. Eventually, my migraines became so frequent, my wife would be the one driving me around because I couldn't focus on the road with the pain I was in. Monday was when I started to see it again. The Parkour Man jumping from streetlight to building and down. Graciously tumbling and climbing. However, he was different this time. The parkour guy I knew wore a ninja mask and wore black clothes, but this one was just a silhouette, and he was constantly staring at me. I looked at my wife as we were going to my next appointment to resolve the problem and asked, "Have you ever looked out the window of a moving car and seen one of those imaginary parkour guys running alongside?" "Well, yeah, I do vaguely, but my life was different when I was a kid, and I couldn't sit still. I haven't in a while, but I imagine I would if I had to ride passenger all the time." She laughed, and I laughed along with her. I didn't tell her that he looked different, or that it was staring at me, or that I saw him at all. The doctor that day was confused about how I was still dehydrated, and prescribed me pills that would help with water retention. My health has declined, and I was starting to feel weaker and weaker as the day went by. Each day felt like I was crawling to get by, and my energy was way down. 3 nights ago, I was awoken by a strange sound coming from the kitchen. My head was pounding and my mouth was dry and sticky. That sound was probably the migraines playing tricks on me, so I would get up and get some water, I told myself, to calm my nerves more than anything. I slowly stumbled to the fridge where we kept a gallon of filtered water for when I needed something to drink, and I also grabbed a couple of Tylenol quick releases to help with the pain. I put the pills in my mouth and drank so much water I had to gasp for air. After I closed the fridge, I heard another strange sound, but this one was outside on my back porch. My porch is about 30 feet off the ground because the house is built on a steep hill. I walked with one eye open to see what it was. I looked around with the blurry vision I had and saw it hanging from my porch, staring at me, though I could only see the top of its fingers and its eyes. Its face was always blank or blurry, but this time I could see its deep black eyes and pale skin. There was a sheen of water on top of its head. I slowly backed away, thinking this may be a hallucination due to fever or pain. I just went back to bed and tried my best to ignore it. The next day I got up and went to the kitchen for more water, and I looked at the porch. The door was wide open. There was no sign of forced entry either, only a single set of footprints entering the home, and vanishing once it passed the rear door. Ever since seeing that, I had a strange feeling I was being watched, no matter if I was inside or outside. I could feel it watching me with those black eyes. Throughout the day, I kept experiencing the feeling of unease and dread. The day seemed to drag on, and now and then I would catch a glimpse of the man in the mirror or the glass. I had another appointment that morning and needed to leave. My headache had gotten worse, but the pain and fatigue had been getting better. While inside the car, I laid my head against the cool glass, which gave me a moment of reprieve from the heat and the migraine that I'd been dealing with. I usually closed my eyes, but the feeling of being watched kept me from dropping my guard and sleeping. Looking through the window, I could see it standing in front of the car. This time, I got to see its whole face. Pale white skin with deep black eyes, but no mouth or nose. He only had holes on the sides of his head, which I assumed were his ear holes. Seeing it standing in front of the car shocked me to my core, and I screamed in terror. My wife tried to comfort me by showing me there was nothing there. She stepped out of the car and stood right where it did, and he disappeared behind her. "See, hun? You're just going through delirium due to dehydration. I love you. It's going to be okay." She spoke in a calming voice. However, I knew better. I knew it was real. I don't know what it wanted, but I could feel it was waiting for me to be alone. As we pulled away, I could see its blank, expressionless stare as it stood in our driveway, watching me right away. As we traveled the old streets in the downtown section of my city, I would catch a glimpse of it, staring at me and not moving. It would be on top of a building. Cold, expressionless eyes would meet me and cause me dread and anxiety, as if it was there and there was nothing I could do. I tried my best to look away, but every time I would, it would show up in the center of my vision. I tried closing my eyes, but I could still see it in my head, staring. We arrived at the doctor's office, an off-tan building with a blue tin roof. A sign on the building in an orange hue declared it to be Mercy Medical Center, and it was shining with light. I felt my fear response speak in my chest, telling me not to enter the place, as I was going to die by walking in. The gates of Tartarus were standing in front of me, wanting me all the more. My wife tugged on my shirt and held my hand, guiding me through, her face shining through my fuzzy vision. With her help, I was able to get to my doctor and start talking. Before we started, I had to sign a few forms, which I couldn't remember what was for. An experimental drug, but it was supposed to help. This is a new type of drug meant to target the part of the brain that controls blood pressure and nerves. Seems that your blood pressure is really high, and this should bring it down. We can only guess that it's a hypertensive crisis that's been drawn out for a week, but since the condition is pretty scary, we've been trying to get you into whatever we can to monitor you. I can give you a shot to take this medication, get it working now, and it'll last all day until around 6 a.m. He pulled out a syringe and plunged it gently into my arm. I sighed in relief as the medicine coursed through my veins. I could feel the pressure of my head reducing and the fuzzy blur starting to sharpen and fade away. I shook his hand and left with my wife. It was such a relief, I cried on the car ride home, being able to look out into the bright midday sky and feel the warmth of the sun on my skin without any of it being overbearing on my body. Best of all, it was no longer in sight, and the feeling of dread and overwhelming anxiety was fading into obscurity. Before we got home, we stopped at the local CVS to get the prescription needed. I got home and the colors were brighter than normal and everything felt better, cleaner, fresher. The lights in my room were clearer and the smell of the home felt more crisp. Everything was fine with no sign of it, and I just forgot all about it as well. I let my guard down. Last night, my dreams were a vivid tapestry of vibrant colors and motions that only Van Gogh could illustrate. It was surreal and amazing, however, this bliss that came to an abrupt stop when I was awoken by my wife's crying. "What's wrong, honey?" I said in a worried tone. The only thing illuminating the room was a soft green light shining from the alarm clock, saying it was 3 a.m. "It wants you, but you keep running. Why do you keep running?" she said. What do you mean?" I said, as I reached towards her hand to move them off her face. As her hands pulled down, I stared in abstract horror. Her eyes were missing, and ink ran down her face. "It needs you." My wife, what I thought was my wife, started to contort vocally and physically. Her bones snapped like fresh celery, and her voice became static as she brought her arms over her head to grab the bottom of her jaw and pull it sharply, ripping it off. The bed was flooded by her warm, viscous blood. In my horror, she kept crawling towards me, crying, asking me to stop taking the medicine. I looked towards the nightstand and saw it standing in the background, smiling at me from a mouth made from tattered flesh and gnarled teeth and the same black eyes. Before I could take the medication, it grabbed my wrist and leaned in close. "You have seen so much. You'll run out eventually, and when you do, I'll welcome you into the void." The searing pain left a black mark on my arm, and I reeled away, and as it just stood there, staring at me. I grabbed the pills and took one quickly, hoping the nightmare would end. It was when I woke up from the dream. My wife was there, sleeping soundly, and I reached over to see her face, but it was normal. I got up to go to the bathroom and wash my face for a minute. The cold water woke me up more. The sudden realization made me almost vomit, knowing what I was seeing was as real as it felt. I looked down at my arm. It's a handprint. It's black on my arm, like a fresh tattoo. I only have 30 days of pills, with my doctors no re-upping on them since they're experimental. Even typing this now, I can see him on my black screen, staring at my every move. What do you do when you meet an impossible situation like this? You're still here. Thanks so much for joining us for tonight's spooky tale. If you'd like a little bit more spooky in your life, why not click on one of the videos that appears at the end of our story? Or maybe head on over to one of our playlists where you can get your fill of spooky content. If you like your spooky a little more tactile, I've got a new book that's come out. If you'd like your own copy, there's a link below in the description where you can get your own copy of my spooky book. If you like what you see here on the channel and think you might like to support in a more monetized way, then why not come over to Patreon or become a member on YouTube? Speaking of, let's go ahead and thank our members now. Thanks to Civ Garstad and Unicorn Hollow for being our spooky ghost contributors. Thanks to Janet, Lee Kendall, Saikat, Ronda J, and Sue Casper for being our spooky skeleton contributors. And thanks to Hi Stacy, Winter, Xaronan, Emily Coltsfoot, Stephanie Carrington, Tyler Parker, Cinnamon Fox, Sarah ASMR 42, and Bella Lee for being our Ghostly Reader tier contributors. Thanks everyone so much. We just couldn't do the show without you. If you too would like to support the show, come on down to Patreon or become a member on YouTube. For just $5 a month, you get your stories 12 hours early at 8:30 a.m. as opposed to 8:30 p.m. Also, if you'd like to join our Ghostly Reader contributor tier over on Patreon, you get a book anytime I write one on your doorstep, as long as you live in the continental U.S., of course. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.